Have you ever stopped in front of the mirror when you're completely alone? I'm not talking about that hurried moment when you brush your teeth or fix your hair. I'm talking about that unexpected instant when your eyes meet your own gaze and for a second, it feels like you're seeing yourself for the first time. I know what it's like when that happens, that brief moment when you almost don't recognize yourself, as if a stranger is staring back at you. We've all experienced it from time to time. That strange feeling of looking at your own face and thinking, who is this person really? It happens at the most ordinary moments, perhaps when you're tired after a long day, or when you've just got out of the shower and the bathroom is still foggy. Suddenly you stop and stare. And there's always something different about that look when you're sure no one else is watching. It's funny how we avoid this encounter with ourselves. We spend all day interacting with people, answering messages, working, running around. We're constantly being what others expect us to be: the good employee, the reliable friend, the caring partner, the patient parent. We create so many versions of ourselves that sometimes we lose sight of who we really are when all these expectations are removed. I understand that feeling of discomfort that can arise in these moments of confrontation with oneself. It's as if, for an instant, all the masks we wear during the day fall to the ground. We stand there in front of the mirror, completely exposed, with no role to play or impression to make. And this can be frightening because it forces us to ask a very simple but deeply disturbing question. Am I being true to myself? Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to maintain eye contact with your own reflection for more than a few seconds? Try it sometime. Stand there looking into your own eyes without looking away. Count to 30 or 60 seconds. It seems like an eternity, doesn't it? You start to feel vulnerable, as if you're being judged by someone who knows all your secrets, because in fact they know everything about you. People rarely talk about it, but everyone feels it. That moment when your reflection seems to silently ask if you're living the life you really want. Not the life that fell into your lap or the one that others expected of you, but the one that resonates with who you are at your core. It's such a simple question and so difficult at the same time that many of us prefer to occupy every minute of our day so as not to have to face it. I remember how I used to avoid these moments. I always had the music on, the television on in the background, my mobile phone always at hand. Anything to avoid that revealing silence that forces us to listen to our own thoughts. It's as if we're afraid of discovering that the person in the mirror has something important to tell us, something we might not be ready to hear. The ancients used to say that the eyes are the window to the soul. When we look into our own eyes, we are really looking beyond the surface. It's as if we can see beyond the lines of expression, the signs of tiredness or the masks we wear. In the silence of that moment, your reflection can't lie. It shows exactly where you are, not where you pretend to be. Have you ever felt that twinge in your chest when your reflection seems to say, "This isn't you"? It happens when we're living out of alignment with our deepest values. Maybe you've spent all day doing things that bring you no satisfaction, or you've said yes when you really wanted to say no. Your body knows this even before your mind admits it, and your reflection only confirms what your heart is already trying to tell you. It's fascinating to think that we spend so much time worrying about what others see when they look at us, but so little time reflecting on what we see when we look at ourselves. We spend fortunes on clothes, makeup, gyms, all to improve the image we project outwards. But how much do we invest in really getting to know and accept the person we find in the mirror when we are completely alone? Those moments of solitude in front of the mirror are like portals. However brief, they offer a rare opportunity to truly connect with oneself. It's when we're not trying to be anything to anyone, we're not trying to impress, please, or correspond. We're just being. And in that simplicity, there is a profound truth waiting to be recognized. The reflection you see when no one is looking is not just an image, it's an invitation. An invitation to stop, to take a deep breath and ask, who am I when I'm not trying to be someone for others? This question, so simple on the surface, is the beginning of a journey that many are afraid to start, but that we are all called to embark on at some point in our lives. Consider how nature offers us reflections everywhere. The calm surface of a lake reflects the sky, the trees, and anyone who leans on it. But when the wind blows and the water churns, the reflection is distorted. It's no different with our own perception. When our minds are agitated by worries, fears, and expectations, we also distort our own image. We only see broken fragments of who we are, never the whole picture. Have you ever watched a small child in front of a mirror? They smile, make faces, play with their reflection without judgment or embarrassment. Somewhere along the way, we lose this uncomplicated relationship with our image. We start to notice every imperfection, every wrinkle, every flaw, and forget to see the whole person that exists there. The reflection becomes a strict judge instead of an old friend. The seasons can teach us a lot about our own cycles. In winter, the trees look dead, stripped of their leaves and colors. But beneath the surface, there is life preparing to resurface. How often do we look at ourselves and only see winter, ignoring the seeds of renewal that are just waiting for the right moment to bloom? Your reflection may seem to show only fatigue or disappointment, but there is always more beneath the surface. Think about what it's like to wait in a long queue at the supermarket. Your mind wanders, you get impatient, you constantly look at your watch. That's how many of us go through life, always waiting for the next moment, rarely present in the current one. When you look in the mirror in full awareness, in no hurry to go somewhere else or do something else, something extraordinary happens. Time seems to slow down and you begin to see beyond your physical features. Cooking a meal from scratch requires presence. You need to feel the ingredients, adjust the seasoning, pay attention to the signals the food gives you. It's no different when you learn to really see yourself. It requires time, attention, and care. We can't just pass our eyes quickly and expect a deep understanding. We need to be willing to slow cook our self-knowledge, allowing the complex flavors of who we are to really develop. The deepest waters of the ocean are the calmest. Storms on the surface are barely felt in the depths. When you allow yourself those moments of truly meeting yourself, you are diving beyond the daily hustle and bustle, beyond the petty dramas and frustrations. You're touching a more constant and true part of yourself that remains intact, no matter what turbulence you're facing in life. I remember an old fisherman I once knew. He could look at the same spot in the ocean every day and always see something new. The sea is never the same twice, he used to say, just like us. Every time you meet your reflection, you're getting to know a slightly different version of yourself. Not a complete stranger, but not exactly the same person as yesterday either. There is wisdom in recognizing these subtle transformations. Learning to ride a bike involves falls and imbalances until suddenly something magical happens. Your body understands the movement and you just go. Learning to really see yourself also involves initial discomfort. We may stumble over truths we'd rather ignore or feel vulnerable and exposed. But if we persist, there comes a time when the conversation with our reflection flows naturally, effortlessly. There is a practice in some ancient cultures of covering mirrors during periods of mourning, not just out of superstition, but out of an intuitive realization that in moments of great pain, we need to turn our attention inwards, not to the external image. Sometimes, when we are going through profound transformations, our reflection can seem like a stranger, not because we've changed completely, but because we're seeing layers of ourselves that were hidden before. A beehive works in perfect harmony because each bee knows its purpose within the whole. When we lose touch with who we really are, it's like a bee wandering aimlessly, unable to find its way back to the hive. Those moments of connection with your reflection are like invisible threads that can always guide you back to your true center, no matter how far you've wandered. Indigenous cultures around the world have a deep understanding that getting to know yourself is not an act of isolation, but of deeper connection. When you really see yourself, you also begin to see others more clearly. It's like cleaning a foggy window. Suddenly the whole landscape becomes clearer. Your reflection isn't trying to separate you from the world, but to help you find your true place in it. Think of the stars. During the day, they don't disappear, they just become invisible due to the blinding brightness of the sun. In the same way, essential aspects of who you are never really disappear, even when they are temporarily obscured by the bright lights and noise of daily life. Your reflection in moments of stillness is like the night sky. It reveals whole constellations of your being that have been there all along, just waiting for the right moment to be seen. It's fascinating how a simple mirror can show us so much. Not just our external appearance, but also the state of our inner life. When we avoid our own gaze, there's usually something we're avoiding in our life. Perhaps it's a difficult decision, an uncomfortable truth, or an abandoned dream that still whispers in our ears. The first step towards any real change is simply being willing to see what's there, without filters or excuses. Often the discomfort we feel when we look deeply at ourselves comes from the conflict between who we have become and who we really are. It's like wearing the wrong size shoe. You can get used to the discomfort, but it never completely goes away. Your reflection is always trying to show you where the shoes squeeze, where you're squirming to fit into spaces that weren't made for you. Pain isn't always an enemy. Sometimes it's just a messenger trying to deliver important information. Have you noticed how, in the different lights of the day, your reflection seems to change? In the bright light of morning, every detail is visible. In the soft glow of dusk, the contours soften. We are not static beings, but ever-changing creatures, influenced by our environment and experiences. Accepting these multiple facets of yourself isn't indecision, it's honesty. You don't have to be just one thing defined by a single characteristic or moment in your life. True transformation rarely comes from a drastic external change. It's not a new look, a new job, or a new relationship that fundamentally changes who you are. Real change begins in those silent moments of recognition, when you look yourself in the eye and admit, "This isn't working for me," or "This isn't who I want to be anymore." This honest recognition, however painful, contains the seed of all genuine transformation. There is a phenomenon that scientists call inattention blindness, when we are so focused on one thing that we literally don't see what's right in front of us. We do this with ourselves too. We focus so much on our flaws or a single aspect of our identity that we lose sight of the complete person we are. Your reflection is always trying to show you the whole picture if you're willing to really look. Do you know what happens when you stare at a word for too long? It starts to look strange, as if you're suddenly not sure if it's spelled correctly. Psychologists call this semantic satiation. Something similar happens when we define ourselves rigidly for too long. The narrative we create about ourselves begins to seem strange, incomplete. Your reflection may be the first to whisper, "There's more to you than this story you keep telling." In the ancient Zen traditions, there is a concept called beginner's mind, the ability to look at familiar things as if for the first time, without prior assumptions or judgments. When was the last time you looked at yourself with this beginner's mind, without all the accumulated stories about who you are or should be? Your reflection is always waiting for that fresh encounter, as if you had never seen each other before. Rivers naturally follow the path of least resistance, but that doesn't mean they aren't powerful. In fact, it is precisely this flexibility that allows them to eventually carve even canyons out of solid rock. Genuine transformation also follows this principle. It's not about forcing drastic changes against your own nature, but about finding ways to align your external actions with your truest inner impulses. Your reflection always knows when you're swimming against the current. There is a subtle but profound difference between self-improvement and self-acceptance. Modern culture is obsessed with the former, but often ignores the latter. However, it is the sincere acceptance of who you are now, with all your complexities, contradictions, and imperfections, that creates the fertile soil for any true growth. Your reflection isn't asking you to become perfect. It's just inviting you to become real. Most people think that change is like a light switch, on or off, all or nothing. But nature teaches us differently. Think of dawn. There's a long period of twilight before the sun really comes out. Think of the seasons, how one changes into the other almost imperceptibly. True change happens like that, not in grand dramatic gestures, but in small daily adjustments that, over time, lead to profound transformations. The ancient Egyptians believed that the heart, not the brain, was the center of intelligence and being. They intuitively understood something that modern science is only just beginning to confirm, that our bodies, not just our minds, carry wisdom. When you get that inexplicable feeling of discomfort when making certain decisions or being with certain people, it's not just random anxiety. Your whole body is trying to communicate something important, just as your reflection communicates truths that your conscious thoughts haven't yet processed. Everything in the universe is interconnected in complex patterns that we often can't see. The water you drink today has been cloud, ocean, and river countless times. In the same way, you are not separate from everything around you, you are part of a living, breathing system. When your reflection tries to show who you really are, it's not showing an isolated entity, but a nexus of connections with other people, with the natural world, with the past and the future. Recognizing this fundamentally changes how you understand your place in the world. There is a silent power in simply staying. Next time you're in front of the mirror, try staying just a minute longer than usual. Not to analyze or criticize, but to really see the person standing there. Take a few deep breaths. Notice how the air goes in and out, how your chest rises and falls. That person breathing is you in all your complexity. Questions will start to come naturally, questions that you may have been too busy to ask. Silence has a revealing quality. We live immersed in noise, not just the physical noise of cities and technology, but also the mental noise of constant worries, to-do lists, and other people's opinions. When you create moments of true silence, even for just a few minutes, something remarkable happens. The voice of your reflection, which before could barely be heard over the tumult, suddenly becomes crystal clear. And often what it has to say is surprisingly simple. Ask yourself, which part of me am I most afraid of? We often avoid looking at ourselves because there are aspects of ourselves that frighten us, our anger, our sadness, our deepest desires. But these parts don't disappear just because we ignore them. On the contrary, they grow in the darkness. Bringing them into the light, even just by recognizing their existence, is like opening the windows in a room that has been closed for a long time. Fresh air begins to circulate. Most people think that getting to know yourself is about finding definitive answers. But perhaps it's more about asking the right questions. When you really look at your reflection, don't try to conclude, "Who am I?" as if it were a mathematical equation to be solved. Instead, allow yourself genuine curiosity. Who is this person looking back at me? What do they need now? What are they trying to tell me? Questions keep the conversation alive. Answers often end it prematurely. Our bodies are wise in ways that our conscious mind barely understands. When you meet your reflection, notice how your body responds. Is there tension in your shoulders? Is your stomach tight? Is your breathing shallow? Or is there a feeling of expansion and relaxation? Your body is always trying to tell you what works and what doesn't in your life. The disconnect between what we think we want and what our body knows we need is often the source of much unnecessary suffering. Modern life teaches us to value productivity above all else. We are rewarded for doing, achieving, conquering, rarely for simply being. But what your reflection tries to show when no one is looking has nothing to do with your external achievements or failures. It has to do with your ability to be present, to feel deeply, to truly connect, qualities that no CV or social media profile can adequately capture. Imagine that your reflection is not just an image, but a portal. Every time you pause to really look, you are opening a door to a deeper relationship with yourself. As with any valuable relationship, it needs time, attention, and honesty to flourish. It doesn't have to be an hour of deep contemplation every day. It can start with just a few moments of genuine recognition. A simple "here I am" can be surprisingly powerful. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to be kind to strangers, but difficult to extend the same kindness to ourselves? Next time you meet your reflection, try talking to them as you would a good friend. Not with judgment or constant criticism, but with understanding and compassion. You're doing the best you can with what you have. It's normal to feel lost sometimes. You deserve the same care that you so generously offer others. These simple words can begin to heal old wounds. One exercise I found deeply revealing is to write a letter to my reflection, as if it were a person separate from me. What questions would I ask this person? What advice would I give? What truths would I share? Often, through this apparently separate dialogue, we are able to access a wisdom that is already within us, but which remains inaudible in the fast pace of daily life. The words that flow from these letters often surprise us with their clarity and intuition. Nature is constantly demonstrating the beauty of cycles, day and night, seasons, tides. We too exist in cycles of energy, creativity, introspection, and expression. When we learn to recognize these cycles in ourselves, we stop fighting them. Your reflection, observed over time, reveals these rhythmic patterns. There are times to move forward forcefully in the world and times to step back, reflect, restore. Both are equally necessary and valuable. Scientists tell us that our cells are constantly renewing themselves, so much so that every 7 years or so we have an almost entirely new body. However, something remains consistent through this continuous transformation. Something you recognize as me persists. Your reflection is a reminder of both its transitory nature and its continuity. You are never exactly the same person you were before, and yet there is a thread that connects all the versions of you that have ever existed. The contemplative traditions of various cultures teach that true self-knowledge is not so much a matter of accumulation, more information, more analysis, more introspection, but of removal. It's like a sculptor removing excess stone to reveal the form that was already inside. When you meet your reflection with mindfulness, you're not adding something new, but removing the layers of distraction, pretense, and fear that obscure who you really are. We all live in two simultaneous realities. There is the external world of commitments, relationships, and concrete actions. And there is the internal world of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. Most of us devote almost all our energy to the former, neglecting the latter. Your reflection is the ambassador of this inner world, patiently waiting to be recognized. When you finally pay attention to this silent messenger, you discover that it carries news not from distant lands, but from your own heart. It's fascinating to think that we spend our whole lives with ourselves and yet we can feel like strangers in our own skin. This feeling of alienation doesn't come because we lack something essential, but because we have lost touch with what is already there. Like a fish looking for the ocean while swimming in it, we search for a sense of completeness that is already present within us. Your reflection is always trying to remind you of this simple but easily forgotten truth. The poet Rumi wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the whole ocean in one drop." When you really allow yourself to see and be seen by your own reflection, you begin to glimpse this vastness within you. You realize that you are not defined by your limitations, but by your possibilities. Not by your fears, but by your courage. Not by your mistakes, but by your resilience. And this realization changes everything, not because you become someone different, but because you finally recognize who you've always been. The journey of self-knowledge is not linear. It's not like climbing a ladder where each rung takes you constantly upwards. It's more like exploring a complex landscape with valleys, mountains, dense forests, and open fields. Sometimes you revisit the same terrain several times before you really understand it. Other times, you turn around completely only to discover that you're seeing the same place from a totally new perspective. Your reflection is your constant companion on this journey, witnessing every step. There is a paradox at the heart of true self-knowledge. The deeper you get to know yourself, the more you realize that there are aspects of you that remain mysterious, indescribable. It's like a horizon that keeps expanding as you get closer to it. This is not a failure or a limitation. It is the nature of human consciousness. Your reflection doesn't promise definitive answers, just a dialogue that deepens and enriches over time. There's an old story about a man who was searching for treasure, traveling all over the world only to finally discover that it had been buried under his own house all along. It's a metaphor for the truth that what we most desperately seek, meaning, purpose, inner peace, already exists within us. Not as something that needs to be created or acquired, but as something to be discovered and experienced. Your reflection is the map to this hidden treasure, if you learn to read its signs. Many people fear that looking too deeply inside will lead to greater isolation, a separation from the world around. But the truth is usually the opposite. The more clearly you see yourself, the more clearly you see others. As you develop compassion for your own struggles and contradictions, you naturally extend that same compassion outwards. The invisible wall that seemed to separate you from others begins to dissolve. You realize that we are all reflecting each other, all seeking the same basic recognition. Deep down, what your reflection is always trying to show is your complete humanity. Not just your virtues or just your flaws, not just your successes or just your failures, but the totality that encompasses all of this and much more. In a culture that constantly pushes us to extremes, to be exceptional or to feel completely inadequate, there is something profoundly revolutionary about simply recognizing and inhabiting our common humanity. Fear often keeps us on the surface of ourselves, like cautious swimmers who never venture beyond the shallows. We fear that if we dive deeper, we might drown in emotions we can't control or truths we're not ready to face. But what we discover when we finally build up the courage is that the water sustains us. There's a surprising freedom in simply letting yourself sink below the surface and discovering that you can, in fact, breathe down there. In many spiritual traditions, the aim is not so much to know oneself as a separate object, but to recognize the pure consciousness that is the basis of all experience. When you look at your reflection with total presence, You can catch glimpses of that consciousness looking through your eyes. It's not so much you looking at you, but life contemplating itself through its unique form. In this perception lies a freedom that transcends the limited idea we have of ourselves. As you become more fluent in the silent language of your reflection, you begin to carry this awareness with you for the rest of your life. Ordinary moments, preparing a meal, talking to a friend, working on a project, become opportunities for this same deep recognition. The boundary between special moments of self-contemplation and the everyday flow of life begins to dissolve. You realize that the wisdom you find in the mirror is available at all times. If there is one central message that your reflection is always trying to communicate, it could be this: you are much vaster, more complex, and more magnificently human than any story you or others have created about you. Your mistakes don't define you, your wounds don't limit you, your doubts don't diminish your essential light. The person who looks back at you from the mirror when no one else is watching knows this. That person is patiently waiting for you to know it too. The deeper truth that your reflection reveals is not something that can be easily put into words. It's a sensation, a presence, a silent recognition that transcends conceptual thought. It's like that moment at dawn when the first light touches the horizon. You can't fully explain it, you can only witness it. And just as the sun rises new every day, this encounter with your true self is always available, always fresh, always inviting you to a new beginning. In every glance, in every reflection, in every moment of stillness, an invitation to wake up to who you really are.